Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Cold Case Chronicles. I'm your host, Miguel Mares, and I got a really good case for you today. I won't make you wait, so let's get right into it. Today, we will be talking about the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald L. Goldman, or more famously known as the O.J. Simpson case. O.J. Simpson was Nicole's ex-husband, Hall of Fame running back in the National Football League, and a top suspect for this case. For people around my age, most of us know O.J. Simpson due to this case, with a minority of us knowing him from football. The only two things I know from O.J. Simpson before doing research on this case was that he probably killed someone and that his name was the Juice. With all that being said, let's get into the case. In the early morning of June 13, 1994, at 12:10 a.m., the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald L. Goldman were found outside Nicole's Brentwood townhouse, stabbed to death. At the time of the murders, Nicole and O.J. were divorced and living in separate residences, both located in Brentwood. The bodies were discovered by two neighbors who were literally led to the crime scene by Nicole's dog, a dog that multiple neighbors claimed that was incessantly barking around the time of the murders. Thankfully for us, investigators were able to get an established and highly detailed timeline. On June 12, 1994, at 6:30 p.m., Nicole, her children, and others arrived for dinner at a restaurant called Mesaluna. At 9:15 p.m., Nicole's sister calls Mesaluna to say that her mother left her glasses there, and Ronald Goldman goes to pick up the glasses. At 9 to 9:30 p.m., Brian Cato Kalin and O.J. Simpson go to McDonald's for dinner. At 9:45 p.m., Cato and O.J. return home from McDonald's. Note that Cato was staying with O.J. in his guest house at the time. At 9:48 to 9:50 p.m., Goldman leaves Mesaluna with a white envelope containing Nicole's mother's glasses. At 10:50 p.m., Nicole Simpson's neighbor hears a dog bark and cry while he's watching TV. The prosecution will later cite these barks as the barks of Nicole's dog, who was theoretically crying out at the murder of its owner Nicole. At 10:25 p.m., a limousine driver, Alan Park, arrives at O.J.'s home, who was scheduled to leave on red-eye that night from L.A. to Chicago at 11:45 p.m. At 10:40 p.m., Cato heard three loud thumps on an outside wall of the guest house he was staying in. From 10:40 to 10:55 p.m., Alan Park buzzes O.J.'s intercom several times, but there's no answer. Just before 11 p.m., Alan sees a shadowy figure, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, walking across the driveway towards the house. At about 11 p.m., the limo driver tries buzzing the intercom again, and this time, O.J. answers. O.J. tells the limo driver that he overslept and had just gotten out of the shower. At 11:45 p.m., O.J. departs on an American Airlines flight to Chicago, and taking us back to the beginning, at 12:10 a.m., the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald L. Goldman are discovered outside of a townhouse, stabbed to death. Some of the evidence found at the crime scene included a blood-stained glove left by the suspected killer, a knitted hat, and a bloody footprint. Detectives will arrive at O.J.'s house at 5 a.m. and will discover some key pieces of evidence, but we'll get into that later. Meanwhile, O.J.'s flight lands in Chicago. According to lead prosecutor Marsha Clark, Detective Ron Phillips called O.J. to inform him that his ex-wife was dead. O.J.'s first response was, quote, "Who killed her?" end quote. O.J. was questioned for 3 hours by the LAPD, but released. On June 17, 1994, O.J. was charged with 2 counts of murder, but he famously did not surrender to the police and was declared a fugitive. The resulting low-speed police chase of O.J. on the freeway of Southern California in his white Ford Bronco is a lasting memory to anybody familiar to the case. O.J. was in the passenger seat. The car was being driven by his friend Al Cowling, who would later explain that he didn't stop due to the fact that O.J. was apparently holding a gun to his own head in the car, and that O.J. was suicidal. A suicide note by O.J. was found later, but we'll get into that in a little bit. During the chase, they recorded a phone call between O.J. and his homicide detective, Tom Lange. Here's some audio of that.
O.J., you there? Nobody's gonna hurt you.
It's for me.
Okay, it's for you, I know that, but do it for your...
It's for me, for me.
I
That's
know
all.
that, I know that, but do it for the kids too, will you? Don't do this.
All I did was love Nicole. That's all I did was love her.
Hey, it's gonna be better tomorrow. Get rid of the gun.
The chase would end in O.J.'s home in Brentwood. Inside the car, they found makeup adhesive, a fake mustache and goatee, and OJ's passport and a gun. OJ surrenders to police at 8:51 p.m. Now, let's go over OJ's suicide note. Aside from thanking those who meant a lot to him in his life, OJ professed his innocence. Quote, "First, everyone understand, I have nothing to do with Nicole's murder. I loved her, always have and always will. And if we had a problem, it's because I loved her so much." End quote. With that being said, let's go into the suspects. The top suspect is obviously O.J. Simpson. Similar to what we covered in previous learning modules, a good way to narrow down on suspects is to create a logic table and analyzing each suspect. For that reason, I'll break down O.J.'s actions and the evidence that was found by the police at both the crime scene and O.J.'s house. O.J. and Nicole had been going through a break, and around the time of the murders, Nicole and Ronald Goldman had reportedly grown increasingly close, leading some to speculate that they were perhaps more than friends, though Goldman said that wasn't the case. Assuming that the murders did occur around 10:15 p.m. when the dog barkings began, that would give OJ plenty of time to commit the murders, clean himself up, and be back at his house at 11 p.m. to meet the limo driver. Keep in mind that the drive from Nicole's townhouse to OJ's estate was only 6 minutes. Going into the DNA evidence, OJ's blood, along with Nicole's and Goldman's, were found on the glove left in the crime scene. Further damning was the fact that this glove matched a glove found within OJ's estate, behind the guest house near which Cador heard the loud thumps at 10:40 p.m. Both gloves had blood on them that matched Nicole, Goldman, and OJ. Additionally, OJ had a cut in his finger the day after the murders, when police interviewed him. The knitted hat found at the crime scene contained hairs proven to be OJ's by the FBI's Hair and Fiber Laboratory. Also found at OJ's residence was Nicole's blood on a sock. Blood was also on his driveway. The bloody shoe print found at the scene matched OJ's size, and the sole pattern matched another pair OJ owned at the time. OJ had also purchased a knife matching the type of the coroner predicted the killer had used, though the knife and shoes were never found. Besides of all the physical evidence, OJ had been a perpetrator of spousal abuse against Nicole, reportedly resulting in 9 police visits, and in 1989 he was found guilty for spousal abuse. Lastly, in a bizarre move, OJ himself wrote a book in 2006 called If I Did It, a hypothetical account of the murders. Though the book was first cancelled due to public outrage, it was later published, with the profits going to the Goldman family. Surprisingly, OJ was found not guilty in court. Even with all the DNA evidence, the defense team made a point to focus on the technical mistakes done by the forensics team, which created some doubt over the evidence. Evidence was not packaged properly and even left in the van to overheat. This ultimately led the jury to believe that the crime scene may have been contaminated. However, it was worth mentioning that OJ lost the eventual civil case for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown, Simpson, and Ronald L. Goldman, with the jury awarding their families $33.5 million. Hopefully, one day, we will get a definitive answer to what happened that night of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald L. Goldman. But for now, this will remain a cold case. Before ending the episode, there's a couple things I want to point out. First thing is that I still find it unbelievable that LAPD did almost everything correct, except for the most important step of all, following proper evidence preservation. Additionally, I noticed 2 factors that were important to the case that we actually covered in the past couple of learning modules. The first one is the detailed timeline. Just like we covered in learning module 4, it is very important to have a detailed report of events when writing a police report, or in this case, writing a detailed timeline. Secondly, the use of similar technique to logic table to identify what evidence they had to look for. For example, the knitted hat and the bloody glove were left behind at the crime scene. So, investigators knew that they had to look for a matching pair of gloves and collect hair samples from OJ. To close this episode up, I want to talk a little bit about the World War II pilot that was located after 8 decades of being missing. Lieutenant Gilbert Haldane Myers and his crew crashed after the B-25 was shut down as they approached Italy. There were no survivors or records of any passengers being taken prisoners. In October of 2023, the team of Cranfield which consisted of 20 people, announced that they located the human remains belonging to Lieutenant Myers. Now they aspire to locate the many missing soldiers 8 decades after the war. Anyways, that is all for this episode. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace!